This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this informative webinar. I'm Nick, your host for today, and I manage the client delivery process at ANZMigrate. Today, we will explore the different pathways to work and live in Australia, specifically focusing on the opportunities it presents for a rewarding nursing career down under. But with this more, we have an exciting addition to our lineup. Erin from Angel Assist in Australia will be joining us, sharing golden opportunities that go beyond registration and job placement, including valuable comparisons between Australia and New Zealand. So do look out for that. Okay. This is a truly priceless opportunity to realize your dream of working as a nurse in Australia. So please stay with us until the end, as we have a dedicated Q&A session where you can ask questions that you may have. Okay, without further delay, let me introduce our first two esteemed speakers for today. All right, we have two licensed migration advisors who are experts in their field and will provide valuable insights throughout this webinar. All right, first, we have James Allen Hall, with over 20 years of experience in migration, including skilled business and investment matters. James brings a wealth of knowledge to the table. He has a background as an IT project manager with IBM and is a certified project management professional. Additionally, he's a lecturer in immigration law and the author of immigration industry articles. So he also authors exam papers for agents. So I would like to say he's an agent for agents. And he currently serves as the managing director of ANZMigrate and my boss. Okay, next we have Desmond Ang. He's the managing director of Global Migration Solutions based in Kuala Lumpur. Desmond has 19 years of experience in migration, specializing in skilled business and investment matters. He's a certified chartered accountant and also assists with migration solutions to Portugal and USA. All right, so now let me hand over to Desmond who will give a further introduction on our companies.
Sure. Thanks, Nick, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Desmond from ANZMigrate and Global Migration Solutions. And we are really excited to share this great opportunity in this webinar. Like what Nick had just mentioned, this is probably once in a lifetime opportunity. And we are going to learn about how these major expenses such as relocation costs, visa application, the nursing registration, and the training and so on will be guided and covered by the participating employers. Yeah. Just before that, allow me to give a bit of the introduction on our backgrounds and who we are. Yeah, ANZMigrate and Global Migration Solutions started by James and myself back in 2003 and 2004. ANZMigrate is based in Singapore and Global Migration Solutions is based in Malaysia. And also over the years, we have also expanded our support and our presence in Australia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Hong Kong. Yeah, and we have clients in this whole entire region. For us, what is the most important is the commitment to deliver the results and the outcome for every single client who came and approached us and engaged our services. We focus on providing personalized assistance, and all inquiries are handled by James, myself, and Audrey, our associate director. Yeah, we make sure each client receives the dedicated attention and reliable guidance, and more importantly, the transparency from the start. Over the past 20 years, we are known for our high successful records in the migration industry. Yeah, and I would like to share about our milestone and the records and our success records. We have helped more than 20,000 clients successfully securing their PR in Australia with more than 99% successful rates. And this record has gained us being recognized as the top 25 global migration agency CEO by U Global awarded from United States. And importantly, ANZMigrate is also being recognized as one of the top 25 migration agency globally. And without further delay, I would like to just pass the floor over to James Allen Hall, and he is going to walk you through the various visa pathway that allow you to be able to work in Australia and subsequently how you gain your permanent residency. And right after James, we have Erin from Angel Assist, who is going to talk about the registration requirement and the placement for nurses like yourself. So James, over to you, please.
Hey, thank you very much, Desmond. So I'm James. I'm in Australia and registered migration agent. And Desmond and myself, as he mentioned, we've set up these 2 migration agencies headquartered in Singapore and Malaysia, but providing support for clients all around the world. And one of our strongest products is skilled migration, particularly employer-sponsored and general skilled migration, and the other pathways we're going to talk about today. And we've helped many, many people through these pathways over the years. So our focus today is going to be specifically on registered nurses, although we do help with all kinds of occupations. So if your friends or family do want to talk to us about other pathways for migration to Australia, please reach out to us and we'll definitely be able to see what opportunities may be available for your family and friends. One of the very good things that's happened recently in Australia is the government has increased the number of places available for the skilled pathways to Australia. Now, the skilled pathways for Australia include a wide range of streams covering visas such as employer-sponsored visas, as well as general skilled migration. And general skilled migration has opportunities for people to get their permanent residency in Australia without requiring a job, which is quite an interesting option. But of course, there is a lot of competition for these places, so it will depend upon people's particular circumstances, the types of occupation they have, experience they have, the skills they have, their level of English language competency, and many other factors. You can see the numbers here let me just put my pointer on. You can see some of the numbers for this current program year, or the program year that's about to start, which will start on the 1st of July. This year are some of the highest numbers we've ever seen for various aspects of the program. So it's a fantastic time, in fact, one of the best times ever to be applying for skilled migration to Australia. Now, specifically for registered nurses, we have several options available. And as Desmond mentioned, Erin will be taking us through some of the opportunities specifically for registered nurses in Australia. And in fact, one of the 2 big features, if I'm not stealing Erin's thunder by mentioning it now, is she's got a whole lot of jobs waiting for people in Australia and employers with positions to fill, as well as opportunities where these employers will cover the costs of the process, including things like accommodation costs for people that are going through these pathways. So some fantastic opportunities there, which is why we're calling this a golden ticket opportunity. It's not something that comes along every day. So we're very fortunate to have her here. So the opportunities that Erin will be focusing on primarily relate to option 1 on the screen here, which are employer-sponsored visas under the subclass 482. So this is a temporary work visa for people that have specific skills that are needed in Australia and an employer with a position available in Australia and meets certain requirements. And this allows a work visa, typically up to 4 years, that can also be renewed for people to be able to go to Australia and work there on a temporary work visa. There is no age limit for this visa, so it's open to people even after the age of 45, whereas most of the general skilled permanent residency pathways are capped to applicants being under 45 years of age. But this one is open to any age category. In addition, after the person's been working in Australia for at least 2 years on this temporary work visa, there are options to go to permanent residency with the employer sponsoring them to obtain their permanent residency visa. Generally, though, as I mentioned, they would need to be under 45 years when they do this transition to permanent residency. A second option that we have available is a similar temporary employer-sponsored visa. This one is limited to regional areas of Australia, but the difference with the second option is that these applicants actually get government subsidised healthcare while they're in Australia, and the permanent residency pathway is something they can do themselves after 3 years that they don't require the employer to actually sponsor them for permanent residency. So this is an alternative option that we can discuss for those that are eligible, because it means that under their own control, they can apply for permanent residency after 3 years of working in Australia on this temporary work visa. And during that 3-year period, they do get access to the free government healthcare system in Australia called Medicare. The other two options, so number 3, include general skilled migration. So general skilled migration are pathways to obtain direct permanent residency in Australia, independent of a job offer in Australia. So this is something that we can consider if you're interested. We can put you in the queue for this. This does take a little bit longer to process, and there are some additional requirements that have to be met, but it is something that can be explored and even explored in concurrently with other options like the employer sponsored. This can be done in parallel for those that are suitable candidates. And then we also have a fourth option here, which is also a general skilled migration pathway. But unlike the direct permanent residency pathways, this is a 2-stage process to getting permanent residency, where they get a temporary work visa that's an open work visa for Australia to go down to Australia, and they can live and work in Australia. And after 3 years, there's a pathway to obtain permanent residency in Australia. So if you're interested in any of these options, just reach out to us and we're happy to arrange a discussion, and we can talk to you about what the options are and give you an idea of what the right option is for you. But just to go back to what Erin was talking about, when you're doing the employee-sponsored visas that she's offering, those employers are going to cover all of the costs of the process. Whereas if you are doing general skilled migration, these are costs that you will need to cover yourself for the process. Now, with all of these visa pathways, a family can be included. So it's not only the main applicant meeting the requirements, they can include spouse and dependent children in the application as well. Now, the definition we have for a spouse is very open and liberal, meaning that it's not just your traditional married spouse, but even if you're living in an unmarried relationship with someone, we can consider that person to be your spouse, provided we show that you are in a genuine relationship with that person, including same-sex couples as well. We can also include children of either yourself or your partner, provided the children are under 23 years of age and still financially dependent on either yourself or your spouse. So there's an option there to include children in the application. Now, all of the registered nurse pathways, whether we're talking about a temporary work visa or the general skilled permanent residency direct pathways, do require the nurse to first be registered in Australia as a registered nurse. And in some cases, we may also require what's called a skill assessment. Now, the registration processes do require some complexity and do require a high level of cost involved in this. Now, we're happy to talk people through and walk them through the process, and we have assisted applicants in going through and completing this registration process. However, as Erin will explain, that we've got a shortcut where we can bypass some of the higher cost and some of the lengthy steps required for this process into a shorter, cheaper process involving registration via New Zealand as an alternative pathway to Australia. Because anyone who has registration in New Zealand as a nurse can get that equivalent registration matched with licensing in Australia. There is a comparable system where we can transfer licensing between the two countries. So that's why you'll see discussions come up with registration in New Zealand, because we can get that transferred across to registration in Australia through an automatic facility where it's just an administrative process without any further requirements needing to be met. And Erin will take you through and explain about this in detail and what's involved with that. And lastly, to talk about the general steps involved in general skilled migration. So this is where you're applying without an employer opportunity. The steps involved will require an English language test. There are English language test levels that must be met, both for registration as well as the visa requirements. We will need to have nursing registration to be completed, including a skill assessment, which is a sign-off by an authority in Australia confirming that all of the requirements in terms of skills have been met. We will then need to do an expression of interest, which is where the information is registered with the Australian Immigration Department, that this person is someone that would like to be considered for the General Skilled Migration Program. And we require that EOI or expression of interest to result in what we call an invitation, which is a go-ahead from the government in Australia that the person can now go ahead and apply for a visa in Australia. And then we're able to go ahead with the visa. Now, fortunately, when we are applying for visas for health professionals, such as registered nurses, whether it's employee-sponsored or general skilled migration, all of these are now given processing priority by the government. The government has stipulated that at the moment, anyone that is a school teacher or a healthcare professional will get the highest priority in terms of processing times. So we expect these visas, whether it's a temporary work visa or a direct permanent residency one, to be processed within months, typically 2, 3, 4 months, rather than much longer processing times we might see for other occupations. So this is a fantastic opportunity for so many reasons, not just the employment opportunities that exist and the cost subsidies that exist from these employers, but also the processing times for healthcare occupations are the highest for any of the occupations available currently. So if you are interested in any of these options, do reach out to us, either via the information, the website that Erin will be providing, or one of the contact email addresses for us, which you'll have from the registration information for this session today. Reach out to us, and we do provide free consultations where we'll talk about the various options available to you, and we'll let you know upfront what your chances are, whether or not it's a worthwhile pathway to proceed and look into, and also what the costs are upfront. We're very open and transparent about your chances and all of the costs of the process. If you do decide to go ahead and use our services, then we will let you know what these costs are, and also our costs are only paid as we go through the various stages of the process. So very upfront about all of these. Okay. I'd like to hand over to Erin now, who'll take you through the process and requirements and exciting opportunities that are available for registered nurses with Angel Assist in Australia. So thank you, Erin. Over to you.
Hi, and thank you. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So, yes, my company is called Angel Assist, and we are recruiters who help people go through the registration process. So in Australia, there was new legislation introduced, which required that every nursing home has to have at least one registered nurse present 24/7 from the 1st of July 2023. So the industry has determined that this will require at least 15,000 new registered nurses in 2023 and 25,000 in 2024. On average, the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia typically only processes 10,000 new registrations per year. So the whole industry at the moment is screaming for registered nurses if possible. Now, 78% of new registrations generally processed through the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia are usually from Australian graduates. And I have found out from my research that virtually none of the internationally qualified nurses come from non-English speaking countries. So the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia classifies international qualifications as either Stream A, Stream B, or Stream C. Now, if they are deemed as Stream A, the process is quite straightforward in being able to get through. But if you are deemed as either Stream B or Stream C, then you must complete what's called outcomes-based assessment. So the process is that you need to sit the NCLEX exam, which is a multiple choice exam, which costs roughly $350 for RNs. If you want to do a prep course for it, it's $500. And generally, it has a pass rate of approximately 80%. And people will get their results within 6 weeks. Now, the next trickier step is that you would then need to complete what's called the OSCE, which is a practical exam, which is conducted only in Adelaide in South Australia. So that means that you would have to pay for your flights and accommodation to get to Australia just to be able to sit this exam. There's a prep course for it, which costs roughly $5,000. And it's only scheduled in Adelaide 5 times a year. As a result of that, there's a large backlog of people who are wanting to sit the exam, and you will currently have to wait up to 18 months just to even sit the exam. I have also, in my research, learned that unfortunately the pass rate is only about 40%. So even after spending upwards of like $12,000 to be able to have the honor of sitting this exam, there's many people who end up very disappointed from the results. Now, I submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Nursing and Midwifery Board so that I could find out which university qualifications from which countries are deemed as Stream A. And what I ended up discovering was that there are virtually no nursing degrees from non-English speaking countries that are considered as Stream A. So this means that unless you come from an Anglo-Saxon kind of country, it is nearly impossible for most registered nurses to be able to work in Australia as a registered nurse. So I tried to determine like what was it like in New Zealand's system compared to Australia's. So whereas in Australia, we typically don't recognise nursing degrees from non-Western countries. It's going to cost you at least a minimum of 12,000 Australian dollars to get registered. There's no guarantee of success. You're looking at a 12 to 18 month wait as a minimum, and there's an upwards of 40% failure rate. By contrast, New Zealand recognises most bachelor degrees in nursing. It will cost you between $1,600 to $7,000 Australian dollars to get registered. It's usually successful for most applicants. There's the possibility of getting registered within 4 months. And if you are required to sit the competence assessment program, which is a 6 to 12 week course to get you up to speed on the New Zealand system, it's designed to help you understand what it's like in the Western systems, and it's not designed to just try to filter you out and fail you. So the process for getting through New Zealand Nursing Council is that you first of all have to submit lots of documentation, including your qualifications, evidence of your employment, through what's called the CGFNS. And the CGFNS actually has its office located in New York in America. And you would need to pay an upfront fee of about $450 for the application, and you will get results within 3 to 4 months. After this, the New Zealand Nursing Council will evaluate your registration. This takes about between 3 to 8 weeks at the moment, and costs another $450. Now, generally, nursing degrees from anywhere in the world, as long as they are a minimum of a bachelor's degree, are considered valid for this process. So the New Zealand Nursing Council requires that applicants must have at least 2 years full-time experience as a registered nurse within the last 5 years. And to be able to initiate this process, nurses do not have to be located in New Zealand to be able to apply for registration. Now, there's 2 possibilities after that last step. One is that if you happen to have at least 6 months experience from a Western style nursing system, so from say Singapore, UK, Ireland, US or Canada, then you can be exempt from having to sit the CAP program. If you don't have at least that 6 months experience, you need to sit what's called the competence assessment program. Now, you would have to go to New Zealand for this course. The courses vary according to the provider, and can range from 7 to 12 weeks and cost between $2,500 to $10,000. Now, the reason we're talking about New Zealand is because Australia has an agreement with New Zealand, which is called the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition Act. I'll just get this out of the way. So what this means is that if you are able to successfully get registered as a nurse in New Zealand, then when you apply for registration in Australia, Australia must automatically recognise your registration and register you as an Australian registered nurse. And this process only takes 2 to 3 weeks. So therefore, by getting registered through New Zealand, it is possible to get Australian recognition for internationally qualified nurses. There is a but, however. So New Zealand, for some strange reason, wants its system to become more like Australia. And they have indicated that they will be changing it sometime in 2024. So if we want to get people through this backdoor pathway, we need to get the applications lodged within the next few months or so. Let's see. So the opportunity that we have at the moment is that the nursing homes and hospitals in Australia are desperate for nurses. And so we have, for instance, a number of nursing homes in regional areas of Australia who are seeking registered nurses as quickly as possible and as many as possible. And we have also been speaking to hospitals who are also willing to come up with the same sort of arrangement. Now, these employers are prepared to cover the costs for internationally qualified nurses to enable them to get their registration and to come to Australia. So the minimum requirements are that we need someone who's got a bachelor's degree in nursing. You need to have at least 2 years full-time experience as a registered nurse within the last 5 years. And you have to have a minimum IELTS score of 7 in reading, listening and speaking, or 6.5 in writing. Now that IELTS has to be the academic stream, or you need a minimum OET in nursing score of 350 in reading, listening and speaking, and 300 in writing. Now, the New Zealand system is quite generous with this. So if you weren't able to get all of those minimum scores in the one test, they allow you to get it up, within 4 different tests. So say, for instance, you met the minimum in reading, you got a 7 in reading in one test, and then the next test you were able to achieve 6.5 in writing. Then as long as you got all of those scores within 12 months of each other, they consider that as acceptable. And generally, there's a 3-year expiry on when you last received your IELTS scores. So in terms of the role description for nursing homes, the nursing homes want their registered nurses to be responsible for upholding the aged care quality standards. The registered nurse will be responsible for assessment and care planning, personal and clinical care. They will be responsible for supervising the personal carers and ensuring the quality and safety of care in the nursing home. The hospitals have positions which include their theatres, day surgery, medical wards and rehabilitation and surgical wards. They're looking for people who have a strong clinical skill set with at least 1 year of hospital experience. And they're also looking for enrolled nurses as well. And the only major condition, of course, is that you have your ARPA registration. So the benefits of what we have arranged here with our employers is that they are willing to give visa sponsorship and support you for eventual permanent residency. They will help, Angel Assist will be guiding you through that process and every step of the process so that you can get your registration, first of all, in New Zealand and then in Australia. The nursing homes and hospitals have agreed that they will help you guys with all of the expenses that go along throughout that process. So as you pass each milestone, then your expenses in that area will actually get reimbursed. So this will cover your registration costs, the CAP program, your flights, and initial accommodation. The employers that we're dealing with offer competitive wages, which are above the award wage, and every employer will be paying at a minimum approximately $70,000 per annum. They also offer salary packaging, and this means that it can reduce your taxable income. They give you permanent positions, and this offers you a lot more security in terms of having a guaranteed salary, job security, and leave entitlement. The organisations we're dealing with also have a clear career path. So they also offer in-person and online programs to build your capacity. And they also offer what's called employee assistance programs. So this includes free counselling, 24/7 support, financial and nutrition coaching, and access to health and wellbeing resources. So the process that we need to go through is, first of all, I will need you to upload your CV and supporting documents through a link that these guys will send you. Next, we will require that you send us your interview availability, and then we will set up for you an interview with the nursing homes or the hospitals. Angel Assist will then help, so long as you have been approved by that employer, then Angel Assist will help with the rest of the registration processes. So we will guide you through applying for the CGFNS and getting the New Zealand Nursing Council approval. We will also help in setting up the competence assessment program, and the employers will then reimburse you for the costs of like flights and accommodation. So there you go.
All right, thank you, Erin, for that wonderful insight. Okay, so we'll move on to the Q&A session. So, feel free to ask questions. We'll read out some of the questions that were asked earlier.
I've been answering some of the questions. Actually, Erin, there's one that you can answer, which is, what's the OET score requirement? I'll let you answer that. You're muted, Erin.
Okay, so it's 350 for reading, speaking, and listening.
No, OET.
OET. Yeah, that's what it is, isn't it?
It's B, right?
Yeah, but so the 350 equates to a B.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they translate them to A's, B's, C's, but I know it in terms of numbers, and I know that it's 350 for reading, listening, and speaking, and 300 for writing. So whatever that translates to in A, B, or C.
So Erin, another question for you, which is, you mentioned reimbursement. Does that mean we have to use our own funds to cover the cost?
For the initial steps for registration for the CGFNS and the registration, you will need to cover those. So each of them happen to be about 450 Australian dollars. So first of all, you would need to put out 450 Australian dollars for the CGFNS. Once you pass that, you show us the results, you will get reimbursed immediately for that. Then you need to put out $450 again for the New Zealand Nursing Council. You pass that milestone, send it to us, you get reimbursed for that. If they require you to complete a competence assessment program, which means flying to New Zealand and paying for accommodation, those costs are actually going to be met upfront from that point forth.
There's two more questions for you. Can you explain the mix and match English scores again, please?
Sure. So the New Zealand Nursing Council has specified that you don't need to get all of those minimums in the one test. So you can sit 4 tests and get the minimum in each of the different categories, and then you can combine that result and then present it. So In one exam, you might succeed in getting a minimum of 7 in reading, and the next exam, you might succeed in getting a minimum of 7 in speaking, and the third exam, you might get it in writing. Then you can combine all of those results as long as they're within 12 months of each other.
Okay, and now another question, which is, may I know if New Zealand changed the pathway, will it be more difficult to get through?
Yeah, they decided that they want to change to Australia's system. And as I mentioned before, the OSCE is notoriously difficult. It's expensive. It's created enormous bottlenecks in our system, and it has a huge failure rate. Now, New Zealand, we don't know yet how New Zealand's system will look. They're obviously a different country to Australia, but the problem is that we just don't have any guarantees about what it's going to look like from that point forth. The easiest pathway to get through at the moment is with the system that is in place right now.
I agree. Okay, I've got some more questions for you, which is, I have RN registration with Hong Kong Nursing Board, an Australian nursing degree. Do I still need to go through the same pathway?
I could get you a job instantly. Yeah, and sponsorship right away. I mean, you would be absolute gold. So yeah, still want to talk to you.
Okay. And another person who's a senior oncology nurse and nurse manager soon, working in Malaysia. They've got a bachelor degree in nursing from Malaysia. Doesn't mean I need to work in Singapore for 6 months. I'll let you answer that.
You don't need to work in Singapore for 6 months to be able to get through this pathway. The significance of the 6 months in Singapore is that New Zealand recognises it as being a system which is quite similar to their own, and they will waive the requirement to have to do the competence assessment program. So that saves you between 6 and 12 weeks of doing a course in New Zealand. I mean, if you happened to be like close to Singapore anyway, and we're able to work for the next 6 months while you're waiting for this process to go through, you're probably saving yourself a few months at the end of this process. That's for sure.
Desmond, do you want to answer some of the questions? I mean, I'm happy to, but there's some visa ones. Do you want to answer the next one?
James, go ahead. I'm happy for you to carry on the flow.
Okay. I feel like I'm dominating, and I'm sorry. I hate to do that.
I'm just thinking one of the very important question that I should be asking, just in case that this question doesn't pop up, right? With regards to the changes in the registration process in New Zealand, which is expected to be in 2024, and given that we have the next few months left, I guess probably everyone wanted to find out when is the latest, the latest date or the last windows for them to put in the registration process and to get the necessarily to prepare in time for them to put in the registration process, like the last call. So Aaron, would you like to comment on this?
I've been calling up the New Zealand Council and nagging them all the time, like, when can we put in the last of these before the door sort of shuts?
Yes.
Now they were telling me that this pathway is going to be shut from the beginning of next year. Only in the last week, when I most recently called them, did they say, oh, it's actually taking a bit longer than we expected, and it might be between the mid next year and late next year. Now, the problem is that the very first step takes 4 months, at least, for the CGFNS. And then the next step could take between 1 month to 2 months. So you're still looking at like 6 months already. And they are not very firm yet in when it is. I was getting very, very worried because I thought that we were basically running out of time to be able to get this done at all if it was going to be at the beginning of next year. I think we've probably got comfortably maybe a 5-month window of opportunity right now, but beyond that, you might be pushing it.
I'd like to add something to that. And as Desmond and Nick have mentioned, we've been doing working in immigration for what, 20 years now. And I'm personally licensed for New Zealand as well as Desmond. We licensed with New Zealand, and we've actually used this relationship between Australia and New Zealand for other occupations over the years as well, including nurses. We've done applications for this. And the general trend is that Australia and New Zealand are seeking to be in sync with the same requirements across all the occupations eventually. It is a trend, and it's a general intention because of the close relationship between Australia and New Zealand. But there are opportunities like this that do come up, and we've used these for other occupations as well, where there's a disparity, and essentially we've got a loophole where we can get someone through an easier pathway for New Zealand, and then transfer that licensing and registration across to Australia. And we've used this for many people in the past. So this is a process we're used to in terms of seizing these opportunities while they're available. And it's great that, Aaron, you brought this up, because it is a fantastic opportunity. So hopefully it's available this year. Maybe there might be still some window of availability next year, but with these sorts of things, and it's a general rule with immigration is if you're eligible, you apply, you don't wait, because the general trend is things become more difficult over time and the risks increase over time. So the golden rule in immigration for this, especially for a golden ticket opportunity like this, is if you're eligible now, you apply now. As simple as that.
And just to add on to what James has just mentioned and what Aaron had explained, I think, it is very rare for us to see in our past 19, 20 years being in this industry, where you see, the registration process for registered nurse is much easier in New Zealand, which this window is closing. At the same time, the Australian government is introducing these new requirements for a registered, at least one registered nurse. The demand is great. Then what is more interesting is coming with the fee registration process being guided, the costs are being sponsored. And I think this is like the golden opportunity that I have not seen, at least on any other occupation over the last 19 to 20 years. And I just, want every one of you to seriously think about this great opportunity and not to miss out this opportunity. Yeah, and perhaps we may continue.
We've got a lot more questions actually to go through. I'll answer. Jennifer's just asked, one clarification, are you / organization registered with the government? So in Australia, it is mandatory that anyone providing migration advice or services must be a registered migration agent. And both Desmond and myself are registered migration agents with the Australian government. Aaron, on your side, you would hold all the appropriate
we're a registered company in Australia which holds all the necessary licensing requirements to be doing what we're doing.
Right. Okay. So the next one, it's one for Aaron. So someone's asking the process to getting this opportunity while registered in 2023, the candidate will be following the current guidelines, up-to-date pathway. Everything we're providing is up to date, the latest in terms of standards and requirements. So yes, that's an absolute given. We're not giving you out-of-date information here. Aaron, fresh graduate from Malaysia, recently completed diploma in nursing. And my Malaysian Nursing Board converted to Australian Nursing Board. Well, obviously diploma, they can't get a registered nurse status in Australia as a diploma. You would have to study a bachelor degree if you want to become a registered nurse for the Australian standards. So we can't do anything with that unless you've got the bachelor degree.
That being said, these nursing homes and hospitals that I am dealing with are also going to be very interested in any enrolled nurses that they can get.
Yeah.
That's an entirely different conversation in
Yeah.
terms of like the visa requirements.
The problem is, though, with the APRA registration for an enrolled nurse, they must have studied to be an enrolled nurse. They can't do a nursing diploma from Malaysia that sets them up for a registered nurse and then use that to become an enrolled nurse for Australia. Unfortunately, you know, I think they should allow that. They don't. They have to have a specific outcome in Malaysia of being an enrolled nurse to then use that qualification for Australia, which is a little bit unfair. That's one of the limitations we have with the system, unfortunately. Erin, can you recap the general requirements for New Zealand registered nurse?
Okay, 3 main things. First of all, you must have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in nursing. Second, you need to have at least 2 years full-time experience as a registered nurse within the last 5 years. Third are your English requirements. So that means 7 across the board in IELTS, except for writing, which is 6.5, or for the OET, in terms of numbers, it's 350 for everything except for writing, which is 300.
We've got so many more questions. I hope this is okay, which is
Sure.
It's great. We've got so many people asking questions, which is means they've been listening in and they're very interested. So the next one is, can you choose a centre or hospital to work? For example, I work in daycare oncology. May I choose to work in daycare oncology centre, or is it selected by the sponsor or employer?
I have made a provision within the first application form that you send through so that you can indicate what your specialty is and what your preference is, and then I will endeavour to match you to that type of employer.
Okay, next one is, I don't have a degree in nursing, sorry, but have a diploma in nursing. Can I work as a nurse in Australia or New Zealand? And we just talked about that, which is the only way you can use a diploma is if it specifically was a diploma with an outcome of being an enrolled nurse in your country. If the outcome is as a registered nurse, based upon a diploma, then no, you can't. In those situations, you would need to study a bachelor degree. And if you do want to study a bachelor degree in Australia or New Zealand, we can also assist with that enrolment process and student visa as well. So that's something we can assist with. We also cover the education side. A diploma, another similar question, which is a diploma in nursing by University of Wollongong and Penang recognised to be an enrolled nurse in Australia? We've pretty much answered that already, unless you want to add anything, Erin.
No.
Okay. Is a spouse and children covered by the employer as well?
That would be up to negotiation. Yeah.
I'm not sure what they're asking. If I guess what the relocation costs associated with that, perhaps.
Yeah, or the visa costs.
Yeah, well, in terms of the visa costs, there is an additional cost when you do have a spouse and children included in the visa application, but it's not it's a partial cost that's added on, so it's not as significant as the main visa cost. But as Erin said, this is something we could potentially negotiate. So do reach out to us and we can discuss.
Yeah.
Someone said, I'm Iranian, but living in Malaysia. I have a 5-year gap since I was working as a nurse. Obviously, we've got recency of practice requirements here. So can I apply for Australia? Do you want to answer that?
The New Zealand Nursing Council is like, we are trying to meet the minimum of the New Zealand Nursing Council's requirements to be able to get you through this pathway. And they are quite specific in saying that they want it within the last 5 years. I'm happy to reach out to them, like with your specific example, and see, you know, if they would be open to receiving that. But yeah, their requirements were that they preferred people to have that experience within the last 5 years.
I know that when you're applying directly for Australia and APRA, they have a recency of practice, which I think is 3 months. At least 3 months work experience in the last 5 years from memory. Do you remember the details for that?
I don't remember it for APRA.
No worries. Okay, let me just mark that as answered. Yes, so the person that was asking about the cost for the partner and spouse was talking about the relocation and visa application costs. So as you said, that's something that could potentially be negotiated, but it's not a definite, necessarily a yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
definitely. The employers that we are speaking to are so desperate for nurses. I am sure that they are going to be quite open to making sure that they can be accommodating for families as well.
There's one here which I'll answer, which is about the age limit. So Australia having an age limit of 45 for the permanent residency pathways. Now, a couple of things I want to add. Also, when you're doing this and you've got your New Zealand registration, that also means you can also be considered for New Zealand skilled migration. And New Zealand skilled migration, the age for permanent residency is normally 55 years of age. So that's an option to also consider. I know this is separate to what Erin's been talking about the employment opportunities, but we're talking about residency and visa pathways. New Zealand does have permanent residency generally for skilled related situations up to age 55 as a general requirement. And that's something we can talk to you about if you're interested in. For Australia, there can be some exceptions to the age limit of 45 through some special agreements for certain locations in Australia. It's a case-by-case basis that we need to look into in terms of what skills a person has, where the employment opportunities are in Australia and what the rules are for that. But there is an option for certain variants there. And the Australian government is looking at possibly changing the age limit and increasing it from 45 onwards. It is one of the things that the government is looking at in Australia, but we don't have any definite blanket rule for changing this at this time. But there can be some case-to-case basis situations, as I mentioned, under things such as the DAMA, D-A-M-A, which is a special agreement that gives flexibility for certain regions in Australia. So I know it's a complex answer. It's a complex question. So the short answer is no. As a blanket rule, no, we don't have any option to waive the 45 as a general requirement. New Zealand, 55, but there can be some case-to-case exceptions in Australia, and they are looking at potentially changing the overall age limit in Australia. Okay. Okay. Erin, I'll let you answer this one. Once we get the license, how long is the duration for us to start work in Australia?
The employers are hoping for a minimum of 3-year contracts.
Another one, which is if I get rejected the first time, how long before I can try again?
Rejected in which part? If you are rejected during the interview process, I have got multiple employers lined up, and I can just keep on taking you from one employer to the next until we get you past the first hurdle. I'm not sure about if you get rejected from like the New Zealand Nursing Council process. That depends on why you are rejected. It is possible to start the application process without having the minimum IELTS scores. And they require, after you've submitted your application for the CGFNS, they give you up to 12 months to be able to reach that minimum IELTS score. Now, you have to keep in mind, though, that we're trying to get this approval from the New Zealand Nursing Council before they switch over to the OSCE system. So you're probably wanting to get the minimum IELTS results, within the next 6 months, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. I'll answer this one. So someone's asked, once they get the nursing license from New Zealand and get the PR in New Zealand, what is the pathway to go to Australia and be a PR there? So actually, the pathway that Erin was talking about in terms of getting the license in New Zealand is just getting the license. If you wanted to get PR in New Zealand, an actual residency visa in New Zealand, that's a separate process, and that's something we can talk to you about. Both Desmond and myself are licensed advisors, immigration advisors for New Zealand. That's a separate process. What Erin's been talking about is just getting the registration through New Zealand to then facilitate that process in Australia. And the pathway for Australia and getting the permanent residency in Australia would either be going through one of these pathways that Erin's got, where it's a temporary work visa, and later getting permanent residency with the employer sponsorship, or potentially applying directly for a permanent residence visa for those that meet the criteria in Australia. And that's something we can talk to you about. So just reach out to us and we'll be able to cover that. Okay. Erin, this is one for you. I have a gap of 5 years from 2018, but I have experience of 9 years as a general nurse in India and Oman. I did a post Bachelor of Science in Nursing from 2020 to 2023. Am I eligible to apply for Australia?
I'm happy to take that one on as a case-by-case basis. Yeah. I will go through the necessary, the Nursing Council to be able to ask them about you specifically.
Someone's asked, what's the timeline to complete the whole process and when is the latest I should start? I know the answer, but I'll let you answer.
Timeline for the whole process. So you're talking about 4 months usually to get approved for the CGFNS, between 1 to 2 months for the New Zealand Nursing Council to give their approval. After that, you would need possibly to do the the CAP program, the Competence Assessment Program, which could be up to 3 months. So you're looking at, you could be 9 months away in reality. If you can skip doing the CAP program, it could be 6 months away.
Okay, someone's asked, can you mix results from different categories in OET and IELTS?
I think I think they're looking for like either all OET or all IELTS. Yeah. So
someone said, I don't have a degree in nursing, but have a diploma in nursing. Can I work in Australia as a nurse? Well, we've already covered that in quite a lot of detail already, so I'll consider that done. Someone's asked, if I pass the English test for New Zealand, can I convert my license to Australia instead? Writing for Australia is a higher score. Well, actually, I'll answer that, which is if you've met the licensing requirements in Australia, you do not have to repeat the English language test for nursing registration in Australia. It gets converted over without any further requirements being met through the mechanism that we've talked about.
It's quite interesting, isn't it, that it's allowed?
Yes, although you may need to repeat an English language test for general skilled migration if you're doing that. But English language test validity for immigration purposes in Australia is actually 3 years. So as long as you've done the OET or your IELTS test within the last 3 years, we can reuse those for immigration purposes in Australia. So unlikely you'll need to redo any test in Australia, and certainly not for registration purposes. Erin, what's your opinion on this person? They've already done their multiple choice, the NC-LEX. They've done that in the UK. They've done their OCSE in Adelaide and passed it. They've got proficient PTE English, and they've already sent all their documents through to APRA. So they're just waiting for doing the final travel to Australia. They want to know what more is needed. I can't see anything more needed actually before they're going to start applying for jobs in Australia. They're commenting that it's been such an expensive pathway, and they're a registered nurse and now clinical educator for 12 years. They'd like to know your opinion.
That is brilliant. Definitely want to hear from you, and I could get you so many jobs around Australia immediately. Like, you are just complete gold. Yeah.
We need gold stars to hand out here. This person is currently working in Malaysia as a registered nurse for 12 years. So they're saying they just need to do their OET and send their resume. Question.
That's fine. Look, if you haven't done your minimum English requirements yet, it's okay to just send through your resume and get this process started right away. If you feel reasonably confident that you can get your IELTS score up to speed within the next few months, that would be fine.
And you know something, by the way, Erin, we've got everyone still in attendance right from the very beginning, which is quite amazing for one of these events, that they're sticking through all this Q&A. So obviously they're finding your Q&A very interesting, which is fantastic. Another question for you. Is the immigration program only for registered nurses in Malaysia or even for Indian nurses? And if yes, what is the procedural process for the Indians?
The same for with wherever you come from, it's the same procedure. So the only difference in the pathway depends on whether you've had 6 months experience in Singapore, Canada, UK, Ireland. If you've had the 6 months of experience, we can sort of like give you a little bit of a shortcut because you don't have to complete the competence assessment program. But the great thing about New Zealand, as it stands at the moment, is that they have said as long as your degree is a minimum of a bachelor's degree in nursing, that they will generally consider that acceptable regardless of where you come from.
That's fantastic. Another question for you, Erin, and this is the last question, unless any more come through, which is the presentation was talking about nursing home work. If I get a job offer in nursing home only, or will I get an opportunity according to my background, which is in ICU?
I have also got employers lined up ready to take positions in hospitals as well. Australia's skills crisis in health is right across the board. The nursing homes were the first ones to be approaching me, which is why I've got them listed first. But the hospitals are equally just as desperate. So I have made a provision in the application form so that you can indicate what your specialty is, and then I will make sure that we match you up with what your preferences are. Yeah.
So then I'll sum it up by saying that no matter what your situation is, reach out to us, reach out to Erin and Desmond and myself, and the contact details are on the screen there. That you should reach out to us, discuss the various situations. Don't rule yourself out. And if for some reason you're eligible, we'll certainly tell you. But there are a lot of opportunities for everyone to have opportunities for this in a wide range of occupations and wide range of backgrounds. So reach out to us and we'll certainly be able to assist you and let you know what options are available to you. And Erin's got these fantastic golden ticket opportunities of jobs, not only in nursing homes, but also in hospitals around Australia as well.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you everyone for attending the webinar. Hope you enjoyed it. And thank you, Erin, James, Desmond, for your time as well, sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
All right, good night.
Good night. Take care, everyone.
Good night, everyone.